Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles. My name is Danny De Lillo. We are here at the South Park Center. I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel with his movie, Superestar. Let's take a look at the clip.
Ni es mi único empleo, ¿sabes? Pero si no trabajo, come mi hija.
Entiendo. Así fue con mi papi. Casi nunca lo vi de pequeña. Creía en Santa Claus más que en él. Pero siempre iba a verme cantar en el colegio.
Desde pequeña me encantaba cantar. Era la favorita del profe de música. Y un día encontraron su cabeza por la orilla del río Lempa.
Daniel, very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for bringing your film to us. For those that haven't seen it, tell us a brief synopsis of your film.
Yeah, sure. So Superestar is about two Salvadoran women, one who's a bathroom attendant and another who is like an indie singer-songwriter. And their paths cross on one night in a nightclub in LA. And they end up bonding over the way other people in the club treat them and over their shared culture and also their differences. One of them's an immigrant, the bathroom attendant, and the other one's a first-generation Salvadoran American who grew up here. And the way those things contrast and collide, and ultimately the way they find ways to support each other.
It's such a really good story, and like living in a place like Los Angeles as well, where there's all these kind of like clubs and just the feeling around these kind of places and how kind of intimidating. I always feel for people that have to deal with work in those kind of environments, and then all the kind of misogyny that's in the film as well. Where did the inspiration come for you in creating this particular project?
Yeah, I think it came from like two places. One is that a few years ago, I was really drunk in an LA nightclub, and I kept talking to the and I kept finding myself talking to the bathroom attendant, who turned out to be Salvadoran too, and we ended up just like chatting and stuff. And then I left that night, and at that night I was also with a friend of mine who's a singer-songwriter, who the film's in part dedicated to. And she and I were just had a really weird night of kind of being surrounded in this space. She's Brazilian and Afro-Latina, and we both kind of had this feeling that we were just in a space where we really felt out of place. And that's a feeling I carried a lot when I started working in LA, kind of in assistant and PA positions, and I'd be going to meetings as a writer's assistant, and the only people that would be in that space that looked like me were the people serving us food. And it's kind of this feeling when you have a seat at the table and it's the worst seat at the table, and kind of what you gave up to get there, and wondering if you're losing something and trying to kind of play this role in the way they might see you, fitting it on their terms, and kind of needing to find a way to articulate myself on my own terms, and needing to tap back into a sense of authenticity of who I am and where I come from. So I think the film's inspired by those two things, which is really especially meaningful because it turns out that the club we ended up shooting it in was the club where I got super drunk.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually the same place.
Wow, That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
it just worked out that way for budget reasons. It happened to be our cheapest option. I thought it was not going to be, and then it turned out to be the one that we could afford. And so I was like, well, that's meant to be.
That's amazing. I love that story. What a full circle that is. It's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I love that you just shared the context of the story, because I think it's a really, really important story to share as well, and especially how your personal effects of the film and how it kind of exists in a lot of different scenarios and places today, right? Sadly. I fell in love with your actors. They were just so fantastic. I loved their dynamic, the way they played off each other together. It was just beautiful. Tell us about the casting process.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the great joys, I think, of the film. I was really committed to casting two actual Salvadoran American women for the roles. I feel like I've seen a lot of films where, there's not a lot of films that have Salvadorans explicitly in the film, and usually they'll just cast whoever. Which is unfortunate because there's obviously very distinct accents and cultural things that define Central America as opposed to Mexico, as opposed to South America and the Caribbean, etc. And the kind of oversimplification of the nuances of Latin American identity kind of write that over and ultimately erase those populations that are maybe smaller. That being said, there's 500,000 of Salvadorans in LA alone. So I think I kind of wanted to prove something to myself. I was like, this can't be that hard to find two lead actresses, one who can sing as well to play these women. So I had like a no budget casting like process with like a couple friends and my producer Losa. And we mostly through Instagram and hitting up friends who maybe have bigger followings in the Salvadoran community, asking them to repost it. Did a casting call, just open for anyone, doesn't matter if they had experience. And the two people we ended up casting, Jackie, who plays Miranda, and Jasmine, who plays Christina, are not professional actresses. They this was their first time acting like in on film. Jackie hadn't acted in anything since like high school theater. And then Jasmine is like an artivist and does a lot of like creative work in the community and maybe some like local like theater type stuff, and was in a music video once in a non-speaking role, but like never had actually had the opportunity to play a lead.
They were brilliant.
So that was
amazing.
Yeah, and it honestly wasn't that difficult to find them, which I feel validated in my sense that this is ultimately a choice of just laziness and thinking that we're all the same. So it was very important for me to find them, and they ultimately were like incredibly essential collaborators to the formation of the characters. I rewrote the dialogue with them to make sure it matches the way they relate to Salvadoran Caliche, which is like the specific way we speak, and modifying the language further to be like more specifically within their own lived experience as a Salvadoran person. And and just giving notes on how they feel they would respond in those situations and who they are, and kind of building that into the characters, because ultimately like they're the ones who have to take it over. They stop being mine and they become theirs, and I want that feeling with actors that I work with. I'm
so happy you found. They've got careers. That's what I'm going to say. They've got a great career in acting if they both want it, because
if anyone is looking for actors, like hit them up.
really, I'm so happy because they gave such an honest performance to the role. I think one of the other things that, I'm so in love with the actual story of it, and just, how there was also the part in there of just, I don't know how to say it, but, men can be pains in the butts, you know what I mean? And I really love that there was a sort of, showing that, because that unfortunately is a horrible thing that happens in this industry, many other industries, where people do this, think they can do anything they want and they can't, and we're trying to get rid of that as much as possible in every facet. But was that something that you kind of, in terms of portraying that part of it, and just the misogyny of it, was that something that was kind of important to you to share in this story? Because that was obviously beyond maybe what you initially thought.
Yeah, it wasn't ever meant to be the focus of the film. It's something that's there, and you can't really talk about these kind of scenarios without, putting your finger on it. And you can't, I think, it's not something I wanted to avoid, while I also didn't want to center it too much. I didn't want the film to be about these women's relationship to powerful men. It's about their relationship to each other. So the men just kind of are a presence in the film that kind of embody kind of the negative things that you have to deal with when you're trying to like aspire to something within a context that doesn't openly invite you into it, and they always ask for something back. And in this case, men tend to ask for, in an objectifying way. They ask for you if you're, a woman or someone that they desire. So I wanted that to be in there because I felt it was something that shouldn't be avoided. And I also wanted to play it in a way that it ultimately wasn't the focus of the film or what defines the film. So I, there's a part, like in that part, there's a reason why I purposely had the music get louder as he's speaking, because ultimately what he's saying doesn't matter. We all have heard these conversations from men, and we know that guy. I think we all know that guy. Yeah. So what he's saying isn't important. It's how he's saying it, and his body as he's like inching closer to her, and she's inching away, and then she's like, all right, I need to get out of here. And she leaves. And I didn't want it to go past to some, criminal level, because it's ultimately what he did is something guys do every day. And it's that doesn't excuse it. No, it's but, just exactly. But it's also kind of pointing out the casualness of how this kind of thing works and the way they see these conversations so transactionally and so casually. Most definitely. I think what's again so nice is that you've got two women having leading very different lives, right? And
got very different worries. I love the connectivity of the phone and how that played through. It was very clever. But it was just nice because it actually was the embracing of being from the same country that kind of brought them together, which I thought was just was special. It was a way in which they got brought together as well. I'm curious for you, now you've made the film, I know these were two experiences that you'd put into a movie. What did you kind of want your audience to take from your film?
Yeah, I mean, I think it translates, I think, pretty well to, I think, a lot of the experience, I think, of immigrant people, particularly from places that are smaller, like El Salvador. It's like a really special moment when you're just like out there and you see someone with something that clearly is a signifier that they come from the same context you do, and you're like, hey, you know, you kind of like real recognize real, right? And I think people can appreciate that and understand that. But I think the beating heart of it that I wanted to kind of in a way zero in on is this relationship between immigrants and first generation people from the same place. You know, Miranda is, you know, basically she's living off the work that her dad did when he was basically in the same position that Christina is. And there's things that you like don't understand sometimes between them. And there's things that Christina doesn't understand about Miranda's behavior that comes from a place of what she's building for her daughter eventually to be able to pursue whatever she wants.
Yeah.
You know, I had this kind of conversation once with my dad when I wanted to pursue film because they totally were not supportive at first and didn't understand it. And he's like, why would you want to do something that's like so risky and like probably doesn't like have much economic promise statistically and everything? And I was like, I mean, Dad, you like fled a country during a civil war on foot mostly and like came here with nothing, and it worked out for you. So and also you were willing to do that. Why wouldn't you think I'd be willing to do something that's probably less scary, honestly, than what you did? And in a way, I think about it like that. It's a way to sort of have a conversation with my dad when he was like my age, but in a very different situation because of the things he sacrificed.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's. I mean, you know, it's real life, isn't it? So, well, that follows on very nicely because, you know, here you are having your film with us and New Filmmakers LA and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and a great celebration of filmmakers, celebrating of Hispanic Heritage Month and Latinx filmmakers. How has the experience been for you?
It's been good. It's been nice also to just be in a cohort of other Latinx filmmakers that I really admire and respect, and also just seeing kind of the DNA in their films that sometimes is shared with mine, sometimes is distinct, but in a way that makes it important and valuable, and I think paints a broader picture of the experiences we have, which I think is important. You know, no filmmaker can speak about everything, right? And that's why it's not about any one person. It's about having a wave, right? That kind of makes something bigger. There's a reason why I think when people describe like film, they always describe it in waves, like French New Wave or like Brazilian New Wave or, you know, Third Cinema, you know, and kind of like talking about it in groups because it's ultimately not defined by one person or anything. Right. It's a team sport and it's ultimately a collective art form that's meant to be shared. So I think that's been the most special thing, just like getting to know other filmmakers that inspire me and that I feel like I'm growing alongside with in some way. It's
very special, and it's so crazy. I'm still thinking about your characters from the film. I'm still thinking, what are they doing now? You know, just because I just think I could have watched the feature film of that. Which leads me to say, like, what is next for you? What next are you working on, Daniel? What next are you focusing on?
Yeah, so right now I'm like editing this like memoir film. It's like a documentary-ish project. That I've collected footage just from years of like shooting my family and like being, you know, back in El Salvador as well as here and kind of stitching something together there. It's kind of early in the can, so like I can't totally define it yet more clearly. The project that I'm very excited to be pursuing like next is my first feature. I'm a few drafts into it and I'm sort of building a team of Salvadoran and Central American artists, DPs, producers, and people who I think are very aligned and emotionally drawn to the story I'm telling, which is a very personal story, to help me make it. It's titled Todo Voces, and I don't know if you want to know what it's about, but
I mean, you can share if you want, but you know.
Yeah. I mean, what I can say is that it's about an immigrant Salvadoran family, and it explores, I think, in a very fun and creative way and emotional way, the way things echo back from the homeland and from generations past into the present in ways that are obvious and ways that are less so, and in ways that ultimately, I think, can give us strength to move forward.
Wow, I want to see this as well. Like, this is amazing. I can't wait for this, and I'm so glad that you're in the process of building your team together that can truly identify and relate to the project as well, which is always very, very important. Lastly, so I've really enjoyed talking to you. I just want to ask you a question for any filmmakers out there. Have you got a piece of advice that you go by as a filmmaker you maybe share with people who want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, which is, I think you have to just have, you need to be willing to be very embarrassed and be rejected a lot. It's really important because no one's immediately good at this. I think have to really get through a lot of like personal disappointment, like with like the first short film I tried to shoot, I didn't even finish it because it was just so not working out. And in a way, the second short film I tried to make, I finished almost out of a sense of vengeance, like that I needed to prove that I could finish something. Finishing is just so important, and getting through it, and that alone is a victory. And then you build from there. Every film I've made has done a bit better than the last, and I hope it's like that process continues. But it's just so important to be willing to do that and to like lose face in some ways, and just like risk yourself. I think you need to be willing to risk yourself. There's like also like. And in that sense, you also need to be willing to be like honest and open and like personal, because I think like honestly, there's like no shortage of people that can shoot a pretty image. I don't really think that's like actually that rare a skill these days. It's actually what the image is communicating and what the images cumulatively communicate that matters. And I think that's ultimately what will define you, and that can only come from like by being personal about your work.
No, most definitely. Well, thank you for your filmmaking TED Talk. That was great. Did a really good job. No, honestly, thank you so much for bringing your film to us. I can't wait to see your first feature as well. I'm ready for that. But congratulations. We really appreciate having you, Superestar.